Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. Today I'd like to spend about 30 minutes with you talking about the business of APIs and what we think your 100-day API business plan should look like. Before we get started, just to be clear, the conversation doesn't have to start and stop today. Please visit Apigee on YouTube, SlideShare, and perhaps most importantly, the Apigee community, where myself, many of my colleagues participate every day in discussions of topics just like these. So just to set the stage, my name is Brian Kirshner. I lead the Apigee Institute for Apigee. It's our research organization, our think tank community. And I've been traveling over the last several weeks on a city tour. We have one last one coming up next week in Virginia. This presentation reflects a lot of what I was able to hear from talking to people who are at different stages of their API journey all across the country in companies in over a dozen different industries. So APIs have been with us for a long time. But if we think about our daily lives, they're clearly doing something besides just making it easier for developers to create an app or just solving an integration problem. Every time we log in with Facebook or check out with PayPal, we're using modern web APIs. Every time we watch a stream for Netflix that's optimized for a different device, we're seeing the impact of modern web APIs. And if we think about what we take for granted in our daily lives, perhaps distinct from what we expect within our enterprise, things like booking a movie ticket with Fandango, then being alerted by our phone that with traffic, it's about time to call an Uber for the movie ticket we booked without our having done anything, is a type of API-driven experience we again are starting to take for granted in our daily lives. So what does that mean in terms of the business of APIs? This is the subject of today's webcast. First, every company will be in the mobile app business, and we'll talk about why. To build great mobile apps, you need to use modern web APIs. Once you do that, though, this is the key point. They're a flywheel that really propel you into the API business. It's almost a gift with purchase that you really want to take advantage of, that many companies already are taking advantage of. So the setup for today's discussion was that APIs are becoming a part of the value chain. This is the classic Michael Porter value chain. Every single company does this set of activities in order to generate revenue and profit. Logistics, ops, marketing, sales, service. APIs are becoming a part of all of these activities. And here's how and why. So last year, we surveyed 800 large companies in 6 different countries. Unsurprisingly, almost all of them intended to build modern apps. Most of them were building those for a blend of internal and external use. It's not just about interacting with external customers, although in some industries like retail, that of course is becoming universal. It's also about equipping employees to do their job. Think about sales. Think about service. The reason why deploying apps is becoming ubiquitous is because people love smartphones and apps. This is an annual survey we do here at Apigee of a representative sample of US smartphone owners. Favorability is almost universal for smartphones and apps, and among millennials, now the largest single group of both employees and consumers in the market, it's almost 100%. And then when you drill down into how people feel about the impact of apps on commerce and life, majorities across the board feel that more app use would make managing their home, their health, services like doctor, lawyer, hairstylist, transactions like shopping or banking better. So folks are already using apps and they're hungry for more. Rises to a strong majority among millennials and the younger generation of millennials. And let's highlight probably the most important data point here. Majorities feel more app use would make doing their job better. So the context for why getting into the app business is inevitable is that if your company's strategy is going to be let's deliver the kind of app experiences that our customers want by trying to attract and retain talent without giving that talent the apps they want to do their job better. You probably ought to get out now. It's really going to become a ubiquitous practice. So what does that mean? Well, it boils down to the basic concept of supply and demand. You've got a demand for great mobile experiences, and then you've got your teams who need to supply that demand. And when I say it's a team, I mean it's not just the technology team that builds apps, builds APIs, operates APIs. It's the whole team across the organization. It's the finance team who reviews and approves funding requests. It's the marketing team who thinks about how does the brand translate into digital experiences. But at the end of the day, of course, fundamental fact of the matter is that the technology team that needs to deliver those apps is going to use modern web APIs to do it. It's the design pattern for how competitive, successful mobile apps are built today. Over and over again, in conversations or in research, it's a simple set of principles. You work mobile-centric, you work cloud-first, you use agile practices. That's what gets you able to deliver experiences that comport with what people expect in the market at quote-unquote app store speed. But APIs are also how you capture data back from every interaction with that app you've deployed and present it back to your teams for them to iterate, to decide what to fail or scale, or to improve the experience. That's the fundamental delivery feedback loop. Again, when you're doing that in an agile fashion, you're talking about weeks or a couple months, not months and years. And it's also the way in which you'll introduce context into that app experience. So this applies even if you're talking about an app for your own employees. Think about equipping salespeople with an app. You probably have data about customers and prospects sitting in a number of different back-end systems. And APIs, how you take that and mash it up and bring it into a single app experience. Or think about a simple retailing app. You might want to present product catalog data in the context of a customer's purchase history. Still all within your own walls, an API is how you bring it together. You may also want to apply some form of analytics or machine learning, either on the outbound stream, think about presenting a coupon based on that customer's purchase history, or based on the inbound stream. Maybe you want to apply some algorithms that help your salespeople better target prospects. This is the fundamental infrastructure, and we can already start to see the flywheel developing. I was speaking on the road with someone from a retailer, and not too long ago, the retailer's point of sale system didn't allow clerks at checkout to query the company's website. So customers would be in line at checkout, holding up their mobile phone to the clerk and saying, look, this same product is available for less on your own website. And the clerk would have to say, okay, can you hand me your mobile phone? Because I have no other way to check unless I pull out my mobile phone. Now that retailer had a mobile app. That's what the customers were using. But it hadn't made its way into the internal employee point of sale app. So one of the technology team, there had been APIs built against the catalog, against the website to make that mobile app possible for customers. One of the technology team went off and used that API to hack the point of sale system so the clerks could actually check the price. And he got both kudos and called on the carpet by his boss because it solved a really embarrassing problem and the clerks were really happy. But he didn't get permission. And they said, we didn't request budget, resources, we didn't fit this into the schedule. And he said, it only took me a day and a half. That's the point of how APIs, once you start to build them, change what you can do, the pace, the quality of experiences. And here's the thing. Once you've got that fundamental set of APIs that enable you to deploy an app, that enable you to pull in information from your own systems, you've basically got everything you need to pull in information from other systems. So again, thinking of just an internal use case, an app for salespeople, Dun & Bradstreet has APIs to offer data as a service. You can call one of their proprietary data points about how financially healthy a company is using an API. You may mash that up into your own salesperson's app. So you're part of an ecosystem with access to resources beyond your own walls. You've also got the underlying bones of what you need to take advantage of machine learning and analytics from other sources. Again, inbound or outbound. And a number of companies, including some we may all have heard of, like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, are hell-bent on there being an artificial intelligence machine learning marketplace of APIs, because they see their scale as a great way to turn analytics into a service. And then finally, when you've got APIs for your own teams to use to deploy apps, you've got what you need to expose that to partners or developers at large and start to create an ecosystem. So you have speed, you have the ability to deliver the kind of context, predictiveness, and real-time adaptation that folks expect, and you've got the opportunity for leverage, open innovation, optionality, the network effects of a growing ecosystem. Very few companies jump to this stage out of the gate, but my experience has been everyone moves down this path because it only makes sense. I'll give you a very specific example. Walgreens built an API for its own teams to incorporate printing from the Walgreens app to the photo printers in Walgreens stores. It worked. Once they had it, they thought maybe we could build an ecosystem around it. They invited 5 carefully selected partners to see if it would work. It did, and now they've scaled up to more than 100 different third parties who have integrated printing from their mobile apps to a Walgreens photo printer in a store. Along the way, you see examples of things like optionality. So one of my favorite stories is that in 2012, Walgreens development teams were not going to be able to deliver a greeting card printing functionality in time for the Christmas holidays. They were simply tapped out. So what they did was they started a contest. They offered a higher revenue share and prizes to whoever could come up with a photo printing app, a photo card printing app in time for the holidays. They wound up with 2 that have become very successful. APIs gave them that option to deal with the constraint I'm sure many of us have felt about backlog and developer overload. So why is this a flywheel, right? Well, you can see how these capabilities build on each other, but the key point about APIs in business is that it's a market, it's recombinant. You can use others' APIs and they use yours. So you start to see very interesting mashups across different sectors, across different companies. And as more and more folks do this, probably one of the most compelling is for some airline apps now you can order your Uber directly from the airline app. As more folks do things like that, the expectations consumers have rise as well. And so that serves that flywheel of you want to keep up with those demands, take advantage of what people want and the opportunities APIs present. That leads you into a world that looks like the world of the public API and the internet. This is actually a visualization of widely used APIs on the internet done by a think tank called the Center for Global Enterprise. That's really worth checking out if you're interested in API business strategy and platform strategy. Thousands and thousands of APIs with hundreds of thousands of mashups. This is a view not just of kind of a cool set of point-to-point connections, but of how business is being done. Value is being exchanged, whether that's real dollars per transaction, like printing from the Walgreens API, where there's revenue for Walgreens and a rev share for the third party, or the exchange of valuable data, like when you use a Google map or a MapQuest map, you're not charged for it, but they're getting data that enables them to make their service better. That leads us to the big picture. So if we think about business of APIs at the high level, every single one of these companies listed here has stated ways that digital will materially contribute to profitability and growth, either in their CEO's annual letter to shareholders or their annual investor day, or both. In fact, if you want a high-level picture to connect back to the flywheel pictures, which we've just looked at, read Nike and Under Armour's annual reports from last year. Nike was an early mover in digital. They built the Nike Fuel community of tens of millions of people who are using apps to tell Nike every day, here's how much I'm exercising, why I'm exercising, what my goals are, and by the way, Nike, here's how many miles I've run on my running shoes, so you can remind me when it's the appropriate time to get a new one, and serve me that coupon, for example. Under Armour was not an early mover, but over the last couple of years spent $750 million on app-based company acquisitions in order to catch up and build that same sort of digital community. It's a great example of how the small flywheel leads you down a path of offering more and more and richer digital services and apps, and also how it starts to underpin your whole business model and how it starts to percolate through industries. So this we see as an inevitable trend, because of course, how are most CEOs compensated? They're compensated based on comparisons with peer companies. So you'll start to see cascades through industries where when one or two players make a strong commitment to using digital for growth, it starts to penetrate the entire industry. So what does that mean to you? Well, it depends on where you are in your journey using APIs for digital business. If you're just getting started, in the next 100 days, get into the modern app business. And there's a really important point if you're reacting and saying 100 days, that's not enough time. The point is, make 100 days the right amount of time. Use agile principles to work back from what's the minimum viable product we could bring to market in 100 days. Build that and go from there. If you're already in the modern app business, build your dashboard for this flywheel. Figure out where you are in terms of providing context from your own systems, context or predictiveness from other systems, and so on. Figure out where you want to go next, how you take it to the next level. So the second part of the 3 pillars of your 100-day plan is identify the we use theirs opportunities or the they use ours opportunities. Again, if you're just starting your journey, you may be at the point of using solely internal resources. Think about an opportunity to use someone else's. There are thousands of APIs from companies large and small, and really super interesting use cases like Uber's Uber Experience API. I love the idea of integrating something like a retirement checkup report that's customized to be 10 minutes long because you know that someone's going to be on an Uber trip that takes exactly 10 minutes with their mobile phone. Or, if you're further along on your journey, identify a they use ours opportunity. What partners, large or small, might want to consume APIs or even algorithms that you've built for your own purposes. Finally, write the CEO letter. Get a team together. Again, not just technology, try to pull in finance people, marketing people. Ideate and write what that CEO letter might look like next year. How could digital strengthen your brand and your business? If you've got that CEO letter, if it's been published in your annual report or presented at your investor day, again, get a team together, do a little project, stress test it against 10 companies. half of whom are peers or traditional competitors, and half of whom you call the most admired, the companies you think are really setting the standard for digital experiences. Telstra, big telco of Australia, talks about how they came up with their big picture digital strategy and API business strategy. Their benchmarks for the kind of experience they wanted to offer to customers wasn't other telcos. It was best-in-class digital experiences from companies like Uber. We've got a few minutes left for questions, but please continue the conversation on community@apigee.com. I'll be posting some comments about this webcast there. I'll be watching, happy to discuss further on the community. So thank you for joining us today. And if there are any questions, I'll take them online for the next few minutes. Great. I have a question from Hani. I hope I got your name right. The question is, how do you value an API? So that's a fantastic question, because there are ways to just straight up monetize an API. The Walgreens photo app is a clear rev share. Every time something's printed, Walgreens gets revenue and they give a cut to the third party. But if you restrict your thinking to just how do we build APIs where someone triggers revenue for us or pays us a penny to use the API, telco SMS calls, for example, a lot of telcos will do a certain number of thousand SMS calls, API calls per month for free, and then there's a charge for each one after that. If you limit it to that, you're really throttling the business strategy. So APIs can give you data, right? Think about a check-in or a price scan. Amazon now has physical stores, and there are no prices on any of the books. You have to use the mobile app to scan the barcode to get the price. Now, you also get all the online reviews and ratings when you do that, but what does Amazon get? Amazon knows exactly which books you're looking at in the store, just like they know which books you're looking at online. APIs also give you optionality. So again, think about that Walgreens example. There was a use case they had to get that photo printing capability into their own app. They could have done that with some kind of point-to-point integration, something that wouldn't have been consumable by other teams. The marginal cost, if there was one, of doing it as a well-documented, well-formed RESTful API was it gave them the option down the road of building an ecosystem, of having this contest. So I think there's three buckets when you think about an API: direct revenue, data, or optionality, and what it gives you down the road in terms of ecosystem or mashups that you would never have expected. I hope that helps. Please feel free to bring that question to the community. I think you'll find there'll be a great discussion from lots and lots of folks who have gone down that road before and figured out how they do it in their own organization. What are your thoughts on a consumption-based strategy to deriving revenue? So I think if you look back at that big picture of public APIs, I would say that it's a two-way street. If you're not consuming these assets that are now available for your own business benefit, you're really leaving value on the table. Likewise, if you've got internal assets that you aren't getting out there for others to consume, you're potentially really leaving value on the table. I'll give you a great example that I never would have thought of but for talking to someone face to face. It was a company that builds speakers, basically. They know a lot about acoustics. They make their money by selling fantastic physical products for sound reproduction. He was working on the fact that the way they do that is they have all these incredible algorithms for processing sound. And he had a whole list of scenarios for healthcare facilities, for industrial facilities, where being able to feed sound into their algorithms through an API and back out to the organization were potential business use cases. And he was kind of fighting the fight within his own organization to get them to think about the fact that in the process of building these physical products, which they shouldn't stop building, they're great, they've generated these algorithms that could now be exposed in a marketplace, either to close partners or as open APIs. They've got the IP. APIs are a way to bring that IP to market and get it consumed by more people. All right. Again, thanks very much for joining us this morning, and I hope to see you on the Apigee community. Thanks.